Hello, everyone at Kolel Toras Chaim. I'm so happy to be a part of this amazing project of these great teachers that are encouraging us and inspiring us to live with the Rebbe's words. This few months, I don't know how long this is going to go on for, but we're trying to live with the Rebbe's words that he wrote in Tinyana, the second Chelik in Likud Maran, Chav Gimel and Chav Dalid, such famous lessons, Binyan and Simcha, being Mahapich the young of Anach into Simcha, and Mitzvah Gedolah lios b'Simcha, and it's a big mitzvah to be happy. Now, these were, like for so many of us, me as well, these were the first lessons I really got into, and I keep coming back to these lessons, and I keep being re-inspired and reminded of them, so I'm grateful to be able to share and throw my hat into the rink with everyone else. Now, the Rebbe starts with an amazing thing, and I think there's so many healing words and how to transform our traumas, our difficulties, our sufferings, our worries, and our anxieties from these lessons. And what the Rebbe says in Lesson Chav Gimel, he gives the famous metaphor that people are dancing in a circle, and Yagon Vanacha, there's always one guy, I'm not moving, I'm not going to dance, you're not going to make me. And what we have to do is you have to drag that guy into the circle and be mahapichim. You have to flip the sadness, the depression, the worry, the anxiety. You have to flip it into joy. You have to flip it into happiness. You have to flip it into inner satisfaction, to be happy with yourself, and flip it into inner worth. And it's one thing when you're happy not to be sad, right? If I'm happy, I'm not sad. It's another thing to chase after my sadness. It's another thing to lean into my pain, to embrace the difficulties that I have in life, and use the difficulties that I have in life as a springboard for growth. And I like to call this transforming trauma, that a lot of times we have such hard things that happen to us in life, whether it's broken relationships, broken attachments, worry, anxiety, abuse, bullying, divorce, addiction, whatever it is, stop here, fill in the blank. We have pain and suffering at the end of the day, and no human on earth is free of pain and suffering. And what the Rebbe's teaching us is how to deal with the pain and suffering that we experience on a daily level. And certainly the big things, as we say, there's the big T traumas, but there's also the little D traumas, which is the suffering of every day. Just nothing seems to going my way, and I'm not where I want to be in life, and my kids are giving me a hard time, and I got bills to pay, and everyone could fill in the blank for themselves, right? So what he's saying is that when we adopt a view on trauma, when we adopt a view on suffering, that life is just coming to knock me down. So what happens is that we feel totally depleted and run down and depressed by everything that's happening. But when we chase after the sadness and we bring it into the circle, what we do is our sadness now becomes a catalyst for change. It becomes a catalyst for growth. We look at that sadness and we learn from it to grow from it. So when a person has that disposition, that life is now becoming my teacher, that the events in my life are teaching me about my inner world, are teaching me about myself, you take the depression and the sadness and you're mahapich it into simcha. That's called dragging it into the circle, right? So, a person has a broken attachment. They're struggling with their kids, with their spouse, with their parents. They're struggling with their own inner world, which is, I am, and we're struggling on that level. But then when we look inwards and we say, what is the sadness coming to teach me, right? So the sadness now becomes a catalyst for change. The sadness now becomes a springboard for simcha, for something joy or deeper knowledge, deeper wisdom about ourselves, that if not for the difficulties that we went through, these difficulties wouldn't have developed me as an individual. These difficulties and the sadness in my life wouldn't have, without that, I wouldn't have been more creative, I wouldn't be more refined, I wouldn't have the worldview and outlook that I have. So ultimately, when we look at the sadness and the depression, the Yalgun Vanacha, and we use those things as a springboard, we use those things as we understand our perspective on suffering is one that life, i.e. Hashem, right, is the greatest teacher of all. And when I look at the events in my life and I use it as a way to look inwards and developing myself, then once again, life becomes my teacher, and my Yagon Va'anacha is mahapich into Simcha. So the worst things that happen to me in my life, no matter what I've done, no matter what I've experienced, no matter what I've went through in life, those all of a sudden become amongst my greatest joy. Those become the most meaningful things for me. Those become the most valuable things for me. And without those things, the birth of my inner world wouldn't have existed. And this is what Rebbe Nachman says on this piece in Likutei Halachos, which is actually one of my favorite pieces in Likutei Halachos from Rebbe Nachman in Hilchos Piriyah V'Rivya. It's many, many pages. It's very long. And Rebbe Nachman explains how the whole world, everything has to do with flipping the Yagon Va'anacha into Simcha, being mahapich the Yagon Va'anacha, taking the sadness and using it as a way to learn, as a catalyst for change, right? So he says, the first thing that he opens up with in Hilchos Piriyah V'Rivya over there is that he says that a person as low as me is zocha to wear tefillin. Wow, that's amazing, right? So I love how Rebbe Nachman does that. He's amazing, Rebbe Nachman, that a person as low as me, who's a sinner, who is always messing up, who's roidef against Hashem, is zocha to wear tefillin. What an amazing thing, right? That the sadness now becomes the catalyst for growth. It becomes a catalyst for me to look inwards and say, someone as low as me is actually doing quite well. That's amazing. Someone as low as me is zocheh to do a mitzvah, right? So when you do that, you're mahapich the Yagon Va'anacha into Simcha. Someone who went through such difficult life experiences, someone who went through such depression, such anxiety, such worrying, you fill in the blank for whatever's your cup of tea, right? A person like that is still able to move forward in life. A person like that is still has the opportunity to cultivate and develop their inner world. So that becomes not looking at trauma as a thing that completely came to knock me off my feet, but it looks at trauma as something that helped build my inner world. It looks at trauma as something that helped me, that became, again, the catalyst for growth, the catalyst for change. It was the very thing that gave birth to my own inner world and personality. So when we start looking at the events in our lives as something that's building us, not destroying us, then we're able to be mahapich. That itself is a version of being mahapich the Yagon Va'anacha into Simcha, right? We're able to transform the darkness into light. It's like we don't want the complete eradication of evil. We want that evil gets flipped to good. Right, and this is what Rebbe Nachman says at the end of Likutei Halachos, at the end of that piece in Hilchos Piriyah V'Rivya, that the pasuk that the Rebbe brings over here is Sasam v'Simcha Yasigu v'Nasa Yagon Va'anacha, and the end of the pasuk over here, the Rebbe doesn't bring it in his lesson over here, but Rebbe Nachman brings the full pasuk, and it's a pasuk in Tanakh. You could just look it up also. It's pasuk in Yeshaya, right? It says, "Uvduya Hashem Yeshuvu Valitzim Barona B'Simchas Olam Arosha." Right? The people that are the Pashut Pshat is the cast aside nation, which was far from Hashem. They're going to come back to Eretz Yisrael, which Baruch Hashem we see that nowadays, right? But the Hasidic Pshat is the other Pshat is Uvduya Hashem Yeshuvu, the people that are the most farthest away from Hashem, the people that feel the most lost, the people that struggle the most, the people that have the most darkness in their lives, Uvduye Hashem, the people that feel cast aside, that we're filled with so much shame, we feel that Hashem doesn't want anything from me. They're the people that are going to be mahapich the Yagon Va'anacha into Simcha. They're the people that are going to be hapich the depression and the sadness and all the anxiety and the worry. They're going to come Uvduye Hashem Yeshuv Uvaletzion Berina. They're going to come to Tzion, the innermost nakuda point of their life, their neshama Torah. They're going to come singing Mamish Hashem Yisparach, right? So again, we don't want the eradication of evil, right? We want the evil to flip to good. We want the evil to flip to good. And there's such healing words in here, right? And this brings us to the next lesson. It's just, the Rebbe's words are so healing. They're healing words of the Rebbe, right? It says, Mitzvah Gedolah yos b'simcha. It's a big mitzvah to be happy. U'lisgaber laharchik ha'atzmos marshmor kol chocho, and distance yourself from depression and sadness. Then he says, V'kol ha'chalos ba'in al adam kulam ba'in rak mekilcha ha'simcha. And all sadness, my back is hurting me, my shoulder's hurting me, I get migraine headaches, I got to go for this surgery, that surgery. All sickness comes upon a person from a lack of simcha. Why? Because Rebbe goes on to explain that this messes with our heartbeats, that a person has 10 different types of pulses, and those pulses are obviously connected to our vitality, our essence, and our life. And what happens is then we all get the lack of simcha is a lack in our life beat. So what happens when a person has trauma? What happens when a person has pain, right? Besides the fact that we feel traumatized, we feel wounded by that experience, our body goes into fight and flight mode, right? It's the heartbeats get all messed up, and our body goes into fight and flight mode, and all of a sudden we think sirens are ringing, we're being attacked by a bear, and no one's actually attacking us, right? So it's through the fixing of the heartbeat, it's through being mahapich the yagam vanach into simcha, it's through the mindfulness, it's through the somatic experience, it's through the simcha that all of a sudden we have a teluchas damen. Like in last few months' lesson was Torah Beis, the second chelik in Likutei Moharan, where it says that in a time of a tzara, what happens to a person? All the blood rushes to the person's heart, right? Because it wants eitzah. The heart knows the wisdom and knows what to do. So you're nervous, you're anxious, all your blood comes rushing to your heart, right? Because it wants advice, right? And then it overflows the heart and the heart starts pounding, right? That's the panic attack. You start panicking because all the blood rushes there, right? And then what happens next? Once things go keseder, when a person gives thank you, they say thank you Hashem, then it's the haluchos damim, the blood goes back to its regular way. So it's the same thing here. Once we create meaning out of our experience, and we're mahapich the young of anach into simcha, and we see that life's difficulties were really a catalyst for growth and catalyst for change, then the asara minei defikin, the heartbeats, the sickness, the back pain, the migraines, the headaches. For me, I was clenching my jaw for a while at night until I realized I'm repressing my emotions again. The repression, all that whole thing, when we become unafraid to look at our experience, so then where the taluchos damim, the asar minei defikin go back. And that all happens through simcha. That all happens through understanding that even though, yes, it's true, this is painful, even though, yes, there's a certain aspect of me that I wish that this didn't happen to me, but when we're able to use those things in order to see how they really gave birth to our inner experience, so what happens is, and then we're able to do the flip. Then we're able to transform the pain and suffering into joy. And that's what he says over here, right? Sason v'simcha yasigu v'nasu yagam v'anacha uvdu yeshem yeshuvu, right? Then the most cast aside people, right? The people that are the most far, the most pain that a person went through gets mahapik to simcha, right? So this is awesome, right? If you want to know how to deal with trauma, just learn the Rebbe. He said this way before Freud, and we all have the ability just to encourage, to show that we all have the ability to do this, to do the flip. We all have the ability to transform, not run away, not repress, but we're able to stare in the face and say, yes, I learned something from you. And then through that, we transform our traumas into healing. And it's obviously, we're learning this right before Purim and in Adar and beyond Adar, right? Because this is exactly what happened here during Purim. The Jews wanted to be annihilated, right? Haman signed the thing, Achashverosh signed the thing. Jews, you're going to be annihilated. Talk about a national trauma, right? That's definitely a national trauma on the nation. The Jews are now terrified. What's going to be with me, right? Shtickle October 7th action, what we're living through now, right? And then that becomes the catalyst for growth. Kiblu mashalo klubu kfar. There's a new Kabbalah Satorah. There's a new acceptance. There's a deeper understanding of Judaism, of Yiddishkeit, that it was only because of the trauma and the difficulty that happened to the Jews that it raised them to a higher place. Because that was being mahapich the yagam anach into simcha, being mahapich the depression into goodness, right? So again, the Jews were suffering. They had this thing that happened to them. They didn't know what was going to be, right? They were shaken to their foundation. And this actually, the Yerida became an Aliyah, right? That's, we all know the Rebbe's teachings on this, right? This is classic Rabbeinu Zal. The Yerida becomes an Aliyah because now that becomes a catalyst for us to look inwards and develop our inner world in a way that we weren't able to develop it before. So the Jews, they were able to re-accept the Torah from this difficulty that happened. They're able to re-accept the Torah, to have a new Kabbalah Satorah, so much so where we have the Chag of Purim, which we're able to celebrate, and I'm really looking forward to it, actually. And this, again, this is the whole goal. This is the tachlis of creation, to transform. We want to transform. We don't want to eradicate. We don't want to repress, but we want to bring everything to the tzad of kedusha. Right? I once saw, it says in the Rebbe Nachman of Breslov, he says that Yoshua, his job of conquering Eretz Yisrael was to rid the Zion Amim, but also be mahapich the land to the tzad of kedusha. Right? So we want to transform the darkness into light. And this is the Baruch Mordechai and the Aror Haman. Right? You have to get confused. As the Rebbe says, the tachlis yediyah esher lo neda, is to know that we don't know. Right? That we think something, given our perspective, something is light and something is darkness. But giving the perspective of Hashem, there's a achdus hapashut that is behind every single thing that happens to us in life. There's one hand behind the pulas mishtanos, like last few months' lesson in the end of Torah Beis, where he discusses that, right? So that's when we see there's no difference between light and darkness, right? We see there's the achdus hapashut behind the creation, when we can hopefully one day say Baruch Haman and Aror Mordechai, because when we're hapich the younger one into Simcha, we wind up seeing the oneness. We wind up feeling the Mitzvah Gedolah Simcha, and then that haluchas dam in the blood, the panic attacks, the worry, the anxiety. It's just, you're able to take that long breath, right? I always think it says they didn't listen to Moshe in Mitzrayim because they were kotzer ruach. It's like, and the richas apayim, as the Rebbe says in another lesson, the long breath of patience that we're able to have to transform all sadness into happiness. Let it be Hashem's will, and let all of us reach inwards to take the Rebbe's lessons to heart, to know no matter what we've experienced, we could heal. No matter what you've been through, you could heal. No matter what you're up against, no matter what you've done in your life, never give up. And we have the ability, all of us, to look inwards, to use the sadness as a catalyst for change, that the worst things in our life, our zdonos, our nasim zchuyos, that the worst things we have happen to us in life can flip to advocates for ourselves. The things we did on purpose with full intent that we're rebelling, they have the ability to flip, to be menhapechu, and let us all be zocheh to that. And okay, hope you found that helpful, everyone, and see you all later.